You can open up to First Samuel 22. Whenever you're doing that, you can also open up into the Psalms. We're going to be in several Psalms tonight. We're actually going to read Psalm 57 before we get into First Samuel, if you want to turn there. There were three Psalms that David wrote during this time that we're going to cover here in chapter 22. And just kind of as a recap, as we're coming out of 21, David's on the run from Saul, and he's gone to the priests. And when he went to the priests, he wasn't completely honest with what was going on. We're going to see some of the repercussions of that tonight. And so you saw him fearful instead of trusting in chapter 21. But by the end of 21, we were able to read some Psalms that showed that his heart was turning back to the Lord, and that he was, in his fear, learning to turn to God instead of trusting in himself. And so you start to see a repentance and a heart change that was coming about in David at the end of 21. We're also introduced to an important character named Doeg the Edomite. He's going to be an important character here again in chapter 22. Okay. And so David has, he's on the run. He has shown some lack of faith in chapter 21, and now he's returned back to the Lord, but he's still on the run. Like his problems aren't solved yet here in chapter 22. And a few things I want you to notice is we're going to see David continually submitting to God's authority throughout the rest of the book, and we're going to see God's favor over David, and we're going to see Saul's lack of submission to God, and we're going to see him on a continual downward slide or decline, and we're going to see Saul continually making poor decisions and probably not taking much counseling in those decisions. We're going to see God's provision over David here in chapter 22. David's going to go from being alone to having men around him, his family around him. And these men are going to be warriors, guys that can come in and support David. We're going to see God provide protection for David's parents. He's going to bring a priest to David. He's going to bring a prophet to David. So we're really going to see God's provision over David's life if we're looking at it. And I think the main takeaway we're going to see here in all of the chaos that's going to go on in chapter 22 is in the chaos, we can still find refuge in God. So even when things are swirling around us, or maybe it seems like evil is prevailing, we can still go to God and find refuge in him, even whenever we can't seem to find it anywhere else. So before we read 1 Samuel 22, let's read Psalm 57. So David writes this when he flees from David and he goes to the cave, which we're going to read about in Psalm 22. And a couple of things I want you to notice. David clearly says where he finds his refuge here as he's on the run and hiding from Saul. And verse 5 and 11 are going to really reflect his heart in that. And I'll just read those. Verse 5 and 11 of Psalm 57 says, "Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth." So in the middle of the king of Israel hunting David, him having to leave his wife, leave his close friend, and really not knowing what's going to happen, this is David's heart, that God would be glorified in this. So let's read Psalm 57. "Be merciful to me, O God, be merciful to me. For in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge till the storms of destruction pass by. I cry out to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purpose for me. He will send from heaven and save me. He will put to shame him who tramples on me. God will send out his steadfast love and his faithfulness. My soul is in the midst of lions. I lie down amid fiery beasts, the children of man, whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. They set a net for my steps. My soul was bowed down. They dug a pit in my way, but they have fallen into it themselves. My heart is steadfast, O God. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make melody. Awake, my glory. Awake, O harp and lyre. I will awake the dawn. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the peoples. I will sing praises to you among the nations. For your steadfast love is great to the heavens, your faithfulness to the clouds. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. So he paints a picture here of his situation. In verse 4, he says he's in the midst of lions. Fiery beasts are surrounding him. Their teeth are like spears and arrows. And then his response to that, even in the middle of the situation, is that his desire is for God to be exalted, for God to be glorified. He goes on in verse 6 and says they're setting a net for him, a trap. And again, his response to that is, even in this situation, his desire is for God to be glorified. And so I wanted us to understand where David was spiritually as we dig into chapter 22. So even as he's on the run and he's not sure what's going to happen, his desire is for God to be glorified in this. So let's read 1 Samuel 22, and we'll just read verses 1 through 5. It says, David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him. And he became commander over them. And there were with him about 400 men. And David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. And he said to the king of Moab, please let my father and mother stay with you, till I know what God will do for me. And he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Then the prophet Gad said to David, do not remain in the stronghold. Depart and go into the land of Judah. So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. Okay, so David was in Gath. They let him go. And so now he goes about 10 miles to the east to an area called Adullam. And this is like halfway in between Gath and Bethlehem. Bethlehem is his hometown. So he's not too far from his hometown. He's also probably only about a mile or two away from the area where he slayed Goliath. Okay, so he's in an area that he somewhat knows. Adullam itself actually means refuge. So God has taken him and he's put him in a place where he can have refuge, where he can find rest. Where he can find safety away from his enemies. But even in this place, we need to understand he wasn't relying on the cave to give him refuge or to bring him safety. He's relying on the Lord to be his refuge, to bring him safety. And I think we need to understand, how can we ourselves find refuge in the Lord when life is good or when life is bad? Like, what are we depending on? Where do we look to for safety or security? David's staying in a cave, and he doesn't know what the future holds, and yet he has the peace of God in his heart and over his life. Saul's staying in a palace, okay, but he has a tormented soul. So from just, if we didn't know anything about the story, we would rather be in the palace. But when we look, would we rather be in the palace with a tormented spirit, or would we rather be in a cave with the peace of God in our lives? What are we relying on for refuge? What are we relying on to bring peace into our lives? When life is good, are we still relying on God, or do we kind of forget about him? But when life is hard, what are we looking to bring peace into our lives? Do we look to him for peace, or do we look and complain? I mean, that's natural. I look and complain to him a lot. But can I just find rest in him? Can I take refuge in him? In that psalm, he talked about taking refuge until the storm had passed by. Like, are we willing to just do that? To just sit? So he goes to the cave, and what happens here? He starts to get a following. God is bringing these people around him. In God's sovereignty, we've said this several times, God moves people, place, and time to accomplish his will. God is moving people around David right now to accomplish his will, and he brings David's family around him. Remember, David's brothers were soldiers in Saul's army. So they defect from Saul's army and come over to David, probably because they were in danger. But they may also be recognizing the anointing that's on his life. So then his parents come over, and we're going to see he goes and finds safety for his parents somewhere else. He's probably realizing life in the wilderness is going to be too hard for his parents. So he finds safety for them somewhere else. But his family's been in danger, and then God starts to bring him all these other people around him, and he's putting David in a position of leadership. David's going to one day lead the country, but first he's got to lead these people that God's bringing them around him. And it says They're what? They're in distress, they're in debt, they're bitter in soul. And it says he became commander over them. So what is it saying? He says they're in distress. The people that are coming to David don't have it together. Their lives have not been easy. They're in debt. There's some sort of mistake or failure in their past. Maybe they're running from their debt collectors. But for some reason, they're coming to David. It says they're discontented or bitter of soul. They've tasted the bitterness of life, and they're really not satisfied with what they found. And some of that may be because of Saul. And so they're coming to David. They're looking for something better. They're looking for someone to lead them. And First Chronicles gives us an idea of what some of these men were. First Chronicles chapter 12. I'm going to read 8 through 18. So these are people who aren't in a great stage of life, but they're also people that are going to serve David well. Here's what it says about the men who joined David while he's on the run. So First Chronicles 12, 8 through 18. From the Gadites, there went over to David at the stronghold in the wilderness, mighty and experienced warriors, expert with shield and spear, whose faces were like the faces of lions and who were swift as gazelles upon the mountains. Ezer the chief, Obadiah second, Eliab third, Mishmanah fourth, Jeremiah fifth, Attai sixth, Eliel seventh, Johanan eighth, Elzabad ninth, Jeremiah 10th, Macbani 11th. These Gadites were officers of the army. The least was a match for 100 men, and the greatest for 1,000. These are the men who crossed the Jordan in the first month when it was overflowing all its banks, and put to flight all those in the valleys to the east and to the west. And some of the men of Benjamin and Judah came to the stronghold to David. David went out to meet them and said to them, "If you have come to me in friendship to help me, my heart will be joined to you. But if you betray me to my adversaries, although there is no wrong in my hands, then may the God of our fathers see and rebuke you." Then the Spirit clothed Amasai, chief of the 30, and he said, "We are yours, O David, and with you, O son of Jesse. Peace, peace to you, and peace to your helpers, for your God helps you." And then David received them and made them officers of his troops. So the men that are coming around, that God's bringing around David, are warriors. But David's going to have to somehow corral these men and bring order to them. And he's going to have to restrain them from evil. I mean, these are some of the same men who are going to urge him when he has a chance to kill Saul, you should take that chance. And he's going to have to constantly restrain them and bring them under his leadership. But think of all the things that they would learn from David. I mean, think of when David's writing that psalm and he talks about he's going to get out his harp and his lyre and he's going to sing praises to the Lord. These guys are coming in. You heard them described as faces of lions and warriors. And they're going to come in, and in the cave, they're going to hear David playing his instruments and singing praises to the Lord. And they're going to learn from him. They're going to learn from David's heart. And I think this is an image of discipleship that David, even though he doesn't have it all together, is going to pour into these men. And he's going to train them, and he's going to show them how they should live and how they can come alongside and help the king. And so even though he doesn't have it together, he's going to pour into these men, and they're going to grow under him. Okay? He's taking advantage of the things God has given him. And these needy men, these people in distress and in debt and bitter in soul, are coming to seek refuge in David as he's seeking refuge in the Lord. And it's a foreshadowing of how needy people today come and seek refuge in David's descendant of Jesus. That in Matthew 11:28 it says, Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Where are we going whenever we look for rest, whenever we look for refuge? Are we looking for it everywhere else? Or are we coming to Jesus, the only place that we will find rest? So it says he comes, he has 400 men, and he decides to go to Moab. This was not an easy journey. So he is on the west side of the Dead Sea. David's got to come all the way around to the southeast side of the Dead Sea. He's got to come all the way around with his parents, who are aged at this point, and he comes to Moab. Why does he come to Moab? What connection does he have there? Moses went to Moab? He did? What other connection does he have? His family. Yep. Ruth, his great-grandma, was a Moabite. So Jesse, David's father, his grandma was a Moabite. Okay? So some people look at this and they say David shouldn't have done that because the Moabites were a pagan people, and at times they were enemies of Israel. So some people look at this and say David should have trusted God to protect his family in Israel, and I don't think we can make that. I don't think we can make that criticism of him because we're not in his situation. I think we need to look at this and say, okay, where was David's heart here, and what is it? He's saying everything written in the Psalms is about glorifying God and praising God. And so we don't know what his situation was, but he goes all the way to Moab and he asks, will you protect my parents? Okay? And so he ends up leaving them there. And I think this is God at work even from well beforehand, whenever Ruth the Moabite comes home with her mother-in-law to the people of Israel and serves the God of Israel, that he's setting up this, or not completely for that, but he is setting this up for David to be able to find some rest and know that his parents will be safe. And he says, there's a key phrase here in verse 3, till I know what God will do for me. He knows I've been anointed king. He knows God's going to give him the kingship, but he doesn't know when and he doesn't know how, and he doesn't know what it's going to entail for him to get there. So he's saying, I know ultimately what's going to happen, but I don't know how I will get there. And so he wants to find a place for his parents. And so during this time, not knowing how this is going to happen, David has to learn to trust and obey the Lord. Even when he doesn't know what God's going to do, he has to learn to trust that God is going to work things out. And it says, they say in Moab all the time that David was in the stronghold. So David, many people think that David found another stronghold in Moab. Ultimately, David had several places that could be considered a stronghold. He traveled around whenever he was running from Saul. But in verse 6, we're going to find out that David was discovered, and it's most likely when he's here in this stronghold. Because what's God do in verse 5? He sends the prophet Gad to David and says, do not remain in the stronghold, go into the land of Judah. He doesn't say, we're not told that Gad said, this is why, reasons A, B, and C, you shouldn't stay here. He says, don't stay here and go into the land of Judah. Well, the land of Judah is a lot closer to Saul than Moab is. And so he's got to have some faith and trust in the Lord to go back into what would seem like it would be a lot closer to danger. So he's got to trust and obey the Lord. And so it says he goes back to the forest of Hereth. We don't know where this is. It's somewhere in the land of Judah, probably in the hill country. But he's back into Israelite territory. And his parents are staying in Moab. And now we're about to get to a very serious scene here. We're going to see probably the most grievous sin of Saul here in the rest of chapter 22. Let's pick up in verse 6. Now Saul heard that David was discovered and the men who were with him. Saul was sitting at Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. And Saul said to his servants who stood about him, hear now, people of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? Not that all of you have conspired against me? No one discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. Not one of you is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as at this day. Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who stood by the servants of Saul. I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, and he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Then the king sent to summon Ahimelech, the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests who were at Nob, and all of them came to the king. And Saul said, hear now, son of Ahitub. And he answered, here I am, my lord. And Saul said to him, why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword and have inquired of God for him, so that he has risen against me to lie in wait as at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king, and who among all your servants is so faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law, captain over your bodyguard, and honored in your house? Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? No. Let not the king impute anything to his servant or to all the house of my father, for your servant has known nothing of all this, much or little. And the king said, you shall surely die, you and all your father's house. And the king said to the guard who stood about him, turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David. And they knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king would not put out their hand to strike the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doeg, you turn and strike the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned and struck down the priests, and he killed on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priests, he put to the sword, both man and woman, child and infant, ox, donkey, and sheep he put to the sword. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. And David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. With me you shall be in safekeeping. So God has provided for David, but now we're going to see really a gruesome scene and a lack of reverence for the people of God here. So David's been discovered. The prophet has come to him, told him, don't stay here. You need to go somewhere else. So David is on the move again. And Saul is sitting around with his spear in his hand. And it says his servants. These are not lowly servants. These are significant men. These are people that are in his army that hold some sway. And he's sitting there with his spear in his hand. And they're all from the tribe of Benjamin. That's significant because that's Saul's tribe. Okay, so all the people around him are from his tribe. And he starts to think that even they are against him. His closest men, the men that he has told to go kill David, okay, the men that he has trusted, he's starting to think that they're against him. And he seems to be spending a lot of time in his head making up this story that everyone is against him. And he's probably not allowing anyone to speak truth into his life. Okay? And he's aware that some of the people have gone over to David, and he says, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? And I think that's significant because way back when the people of Israel were asking for a king, Samuel warned them, and he said, if you have a king, he's going to take the best of your fields and the best of your vineyards, and he's going to give them to the commanders of his troops. And we see that that's true here with Saul. He's taken the fields and vineyards and given them over to his troops. And he says, you've conspired against me. And he even blames Jonathan here in verse 8. Jonathan has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as at this day. He's saying, my own son is out for my life. And he's thinking David is out for his life. David's not out for Saul's life. David's on the run for his own life right here. And Doeg has waited for this time. Like Doeg knew that David was there meeting with the priests in chapter 21, but he hasn't said anything yet. He's waiting for an opportune moment when it's going to be the most beneficial to him. And he uses choice words here. In verse 10, he says, he inquired of the Lord for him. Okay, that's going to lead Saul to think a lot of people in the Old Testament, when they were going to go to war, they would go and inquire of the Lord. And so Saul's probably thinking, he is inquiring of the Lord to come to battle against me. And then he says, and he gave him provisions. He doesn't say he gave him 5 loaves of bread. He says he gave him provisions. Like Saul's probably thinking provisions for war. And he says, and the sword of Goliath. Well, who else is David going to use that sword against? David didn't use it to go be the aggressor against Saul. He got it for protection against Saul. Okay? But there's choice words used here. And this is the last time we'll see Doeg in Scripture. Okay? But David writes about him in Psalm 52. Let's read that real quick. Psalm 52. And David has some words here that are going to describe Doeg. Okay, so David's going to name where he puts his confidence, that David is putting his confidence in the Lord. And listen to how he describes Doeg. He uses words like boast, destruction, deceit, loving evil, lying, devouring. Okay, this is the character of Doeg. Psalm 52. Why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? The steadfast love of God endures all the day. Your tongue plots destruction. Like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You love evil more than good, and lying more than speaking what is right. You love all words that devour, O deceitful tongue. But God will break you down forever. He will snatch and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous shall see and fear and shall laugh at him, saying, see the man who would not make God his refuge, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and sought refuge in his own destruction. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. I will thank you forever because you have done it. I will wait for your name, for it is good in the presence of the godly. He describes Doeg in not a favorable light. And he's saying even in the destruction that Doeg has brought, he's still going to trust in the Lord, and he's going to trust in the steadfast love of the Lord. And God is still showing David goodness. But compare David finding refuge in the Lord to Doeg. It says he refuses to make God his refuge. So Doeg comes out and he tells the king this. And so Saul sends for the priests. Ahimelech and all the other priests come with him. And he starts to accuse the priests. And he says, you have conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse. And he says, you helped him in planning, trying to come and kill me here. And Ahimelech responds in verse 14, very similar to how Jonathan responded in chapter 20. And he says, who's been more faithful than David? He's your son-in-law. He's captain of your bodyguard. He always has done your bidding. What has David done wrong? And then Ahimelech goes on to voice his innocence. He says, don't accuse me of this. And in verse 15, he says, I've known nothing of this. He's telling the truth here. What did David do in chapter 21 when he comes to Ahimelech? David said, I'm on a mission from Saul. If David had told the truth in chapter 21, Ahimelech could have chosen for himself what to do. He could have chosen for himself, knowing all the facts, I'm going to show mercy on David and help him, or I'm not. Okay, but he didn't know all the facts, and because David lied, Ahimelech's now in a bad situation, and he doesn't know why. Like he didn't know this, but he's in this situation, and here's Saul's response: you shall surely die. Saul doesn't listen to anything Ahimelech says. This decision was already made. And so he turns to his servants and he tells them to kill the priests, and his servants refuse. I think even though they may not have been truly had hearts after God, they still had a respect for God and for the priests. And so they refuse. And so he turns to Doeg, and Doeg says he turns and he puts to the sword 85 persons. And then he goes down to Nob. The city of Nob was about 2.5 miles away, and he puts to the sword the entire city. And think about this, in chapter 15, Saul was told to completely destroy the Amalekites. And instead of destroying the Amalekites, in chapter 15, here's what Saul did. Verse 8 says, or verse 9, he spared Agag and the best of the sheep and of the oxen and of the fattened calves and the lambs and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them. So Israelites' enemies, Saul refuses to destroy, but their own priests, he completely destroys everything in the city. I think that gives some light into the heart of Saul here. And so one priest escapes, and he comes to David. So think of this. God has now brought men to David. He's brought a prophet to David, and now he's brought the priesthood to David. So even in how evil this is, God is still working out something good, and he's bringing somebody to David who David would need. And David's feeling the weight of this here in verse 22. He says, I knew on that day that he would tell Saul. And he says, it's my fault that this has happened. He's feeling the weight of this. Okay, and he's having to carry this. And Abiathar is going to be with David throughout David's kingship. Okay. Eventually, Solomon is going to banish Abiathar. That goes all the way back to chapter 2 when God told Eli that his line would not be of the priesthood forever. So Abiathar is going to be the last priest in the house of Eli. And that's not going to happen until 1 Kings chapter 2. So even in the destruction, in the evil that's happening, there's still a goodness of God here. Like there's still the favor of God over David. There's still his provision of God over David. And I think even in the hard times, we need to be able to find our refuge in God. And I'm going to finish with reading Psalm 142. This is the other psalm that David wrote whenever he was on the run from Saul here in chapter 22. Psalm 142, and it's titled, "You Are My Refuge." With my voice I cry out to the Lord. With my voice I plead for mercy to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. I tell my trouble before him. Listen to that. He's pouring out his heart to the Lord. He's saying, like, I can come honestly before the Lord and tell him exactly what's on my mind. I'm pleading for mercy. I'm pouring out my complaint. I'm telling him my trouble. Verse 3, when my spirit faints within me, you know my way. In the path where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see, there is none who takes notice of me. No refuge remains to me. No one cares for my soul. I cry to you, O Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Attend to my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring me out of prison, that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. He's still not in a great situation. He says that his spirit faints within him, like he's still struggling. He says, you know my way. He's finding refuge in the one who's going to determine his paths and who knows what's best for him. So I'd encourage you, like, just spend some time with the Lord and take refuge in him. If you're in a good time of life, take refuge in him so that you're already in the habit of spending time with him, of enjoying his presence, of finding his peace over your life whenever the hard times come. If you're just in the mundane, spend time with the Lord. Let him show you purpose. Let him care for your soul. Let's pray. God, thank you for your word. Thank you that we can read the Psalms, God. God, that we can see your goodness, your favor, God, that we can see your plan working out, God, that here you are working out your plan of redemption to bring about Jesus, God, for our salvation. God, I pray that we would constantly find refuge in you, God, that we would spend time with you, that we would just find rest for our souls in you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.